listening to something and it's like, whoa, this is speaking right to me right now. We're diving into one of those moments today, something you sent in from the Faith and Life podcast, their episode, Finding Purpose in Uncertainty. And it sounds like it really struck a chord.
Oh, yeah. It's really amazing how something like uncertainty can be so universal. It's something we all deal with.
Absolutely. And they really got into it, too. They talked about Jeremiah 29:11, the whole God's got plans, good ones thing. But then, how do we make that work when right now we feel totally lost? Okay, great plans, but I need a map.
And that's where I really connected with their whole take on timelines.
Yeah.
They had this great analogy about God, like an artist painting this masterpiece. And we can only see the individual brushstrokes right now, the middle of it all. We don't get to see how it all comes together in the end.
I see. So maybe instead of thinking we're on a detour, maybe it's like we're being redirected to something even better. I like that.
Yeah, that's it. And they shared a story. One of the hosts, Sarah, she was going through this rough job transition and just felt lost, didn't know what was next. But looking back, she saw how that actually pushed her onto a path that was so much better for her.
It makes you think. But how do we actually hold on to that trust when it's tough? It's easy to say God's got this, but living it out, way harder. Did they have any practical advice for dealing with those moments when you start to doubt?
They did. And this is where I think they really offered something useful for how we approach uncertainty. They talked about three main things: staying connected to your faith, your people, and the power of prayer.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. Staying connected to your faith. What did they mean by that?
Well, they said even if you don't feel like you're getting direct answers from Scripture, just the act of engaging with it can be really comforting. It's a good reminder that you're not the only one going through something.
It really is. I've definitely had those times when I'm like, I don't even know where to turn in this thing. But just the act of opening it up brings this sense of calm,
Right.
Okay, I can breathe.
Totally. And that actually connects to their point about community. They were really big on the whole, we weren't meant to go through tough times alone thing.
Yeah.
Who are your people? The ones you can really lean on.
Yeah.
Who reminds you how strong you are even when you don't feel it?
So important. Having that support system makes all the difference. What they say about prayer, they touched on that too, right?
Yeah. And I liked how they talked about it. They said it's not always about some perfectly written prayer.
Yeah.
Or even getting a specific answer. Sometimes it's just about being real with it. Admitting, okay, I don't have this all figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, just that surrender can be so powerful. Admitting you don't have to have all the answers.
For sure. And that circles back to that whole trusting the process thing.
Yeah.
Even when we don't know what the outcome will be. And the host pointed out that a lot of times it's only looking back that we see how those times when we felt uncertain were actually making us ready for something way better. Have you ever noticed that in your own life?
Oh, totally. I think about times I felt so lost. Which way do I even go? But looking back, those experiences, as hard as they were, really taught me a lot about, being able to bounce back, trusting my gut, relying on my faith more when things are unsteady.
Like you were being given the tools you'd need all along, even though you couldn't see it then.
Yeah. And maybe those detours, those moments we think are setbacks, are actually showing us strengths we never knew we had.
That's a great way to look at it. Those unexpected turns can take you to some amazing places.
Okay, but what about when those doubts pop up? We're human rights, bound to happen. How do we quiet that voice that says, what if this is all for nothing?
I think that's where those practices, they talked about staying connected to your faith, those people you can count on prayer, those become even more important. It's not about always getting answers, but about finding that solid ground.
Yeah.
That peace when everything feels chaotic.
It's like having this toolkit for uncertainty. When those doubts come in, you've got something to turn to, something to hold you steady. But they kept saying that thing about a bigger plan, but what if you're not even sure what your purpose is to begin with? How do you even start moving towards something you can't even define? It's like trying to follow a map when you don't even know what direction you're facing right way.
It is something a lot of people struggle with, for sure. But the hosts made this interesting point. What if we're thinking about it the wrong way? Instead of thinking of uncertainty as this roadblock on the way to finding your purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe it's actually the key.
I like that. Okay, so instead of wishing the fog would clear, we need to figure out how to see through it. How do we even start to do that?
Well, they had this challenge for listeners, and it was basically what if you thought about what really energizes you? What brings you joy even when everything feels uncertain?
Oh, I see. So paying attention to those things that light us up, the things that make us feel like ourselves even when things are tough.
Right. And those passions, those things you feel drawn to, those might be clues about what your purpose is. It's not always some big obvious sign, right? More like a quiet nudge you have to listen closely to hear.
Definitely. I've had those times when I'm doing something I love, whether it's writing or just spending time with people I love or being out in nature, and I'm like, yeah, this feels right.
And sometimes those things, those passions might seem impossible given where you are in life right now.
Cool.
But that's where faith comes back into it, right? Trusting that if you feel drawn to something, even if you don't know the way down, there's a way to make it happen.
So it's more about being brave enough to take a step, even a small one, toward what you feel called to do.
And having faith that the way forward will become clear as you go.
Yeah.
It might not be what you expected, might be twists and turns, but isn't that part of what makes it exciting?
So basically, we can choose to be afraid of uncertainty, or we can see it as part of this journey of figuring out what we're meant to do with our lives. It's not about having every answer. It's about trusting that something bigger is guiding us, even when we can't see the path.
I love that. And who knows, maybe those detours, those times when we feel uncertain, are actually leading us to something more incredible than anything we could have imagined on our own.
Right. Maybe the very thing we're afraid of is actually the best thing for us. Something to think about.